The end of an era. Nick Saban's time as the head coach of the Alabama Crimson Tide has come to an end as he announced his retirement this past winter, and that led way for Kalen DeBoer to take over one of the biggest name brand programs in the entire country, and he's got a lot of talent to come in and win immediately. So can Kalen DeBoer hold up the high standard that Nick Saban had while at this program? You're about to find out what I think in this video. What's up, Tailgaters? You're in the booth with Tailgate Nate today, and welcome to my channel. I'm predicting every single one of the 134 teams in the FBS level of college football this summer, which means I'm doing your favorite teams. So hit the subscribe button and ring the bell so you know when your team has a video on my channel. And thank you for watching this video. Help support my channel in more ways than you can even imagine. And hey, if you want to continue to support my channel any way you can like, you can comment, you can share, or really anything you do to help interact with the channel helps to support what I do here on YouTube. But now with all that out of the way, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I give you Alabama Crimson Tide football in 2024. How do we do predictions this year? Where we're going to dive into a team's offense, a team's defense, as well as go through every single game and break down whether I think Alabama will win or lose and predict their final record in 2024. Makes sense? Good. Let's dive on in to the team's offense. But hang on, before we do that, a couple things I do want you to know. The stats, both offensively and defensively, are going to be right over here for you guys to view, as well as for your viewing pleasure. I've listed the team's coaching staff right below the team's logo. Again, that is for you to enjoy. So without further ado, the Kalen DeBoer era is set to begin with the Alabama Crimson Tide. And last season, offensively, well, you could definitely say they were a little bit underwhelming. It kind of took a little bit for Jalen Milroe to find his footing. He ended up being that guy that is going to end up being the starter for the Tide. And last season, again, kind of took a little bit for him to get his feet fully set, but 2,834 yards, 23 touchdowns, and 6 picks, and on the ground contributed 531 yards and 12 touchdowns. Really interesting here, though, because Kalen DeBoer is going to be working with Jalen Milroe, and from what I can remember, really the first time he has a true dual threat quarterback, you go back to Fresno State. Jake Haener was not a dual threat guy. Michael Penix was not really a dual threat guy. Milroe is, so that'll be interesting to see how that works out. You do have a couple quarterbacks leaving the portal, Tyler Buckner and Julian Sang, even though he hasn't really suited up on the sideline for a game for the Alabama Crimson Tide as he was a freshman. That's still a notable enough loss that I figured I would put him here on this portal. Backing up Jalen Milroe will be Ty Simpson, as well as Austin Mack, who is a transfer that comes over, I believe, from Washington. Yes, that is correct. When you take a look at the running back room here, well, your leading rusher in Jace McClellan, 890 yards and 8 touchdowns last season, is going to be gone, now playing on Sundays, as well as Roydell Williams. He is transferred off, I believe, to Florida State. Yes, he is off to Florida State, 590 yards for him last season. So that's your top 2 leading rushers. Those guys are going to be gone. However, I don't doubt the talent that is in this Alabama running back room. You have Jam Miller, Justice Haynes, and Richard Young that are going to be that 1-2-3 punch there. Miller was the leading rusher out of those 3 last year, 201 yards, 1 touchdown on 41 carries. Haynes had 25 carries for 168 yards and 2 touchdowns. That is a much better yards per carry number. So I think it's going to take a little bit to find out who that number 1 is going to be. Will it be Miller? Will it be Haynes? But this is a running back room that I do have some confidence in with the Alabama Crimson Tide. They are going to miss McClellan. They are going to miss Williams, but I have faith in these young guys that are in this room. Jermaine Burton is off to play on Sundays, 798 yards, 8 touchdowns. Both of those numbers led the team for Alabama in receiving last year, as well as Isaiah Bond and Ja'Cory Brooks are a couple names that leave through the transfer portal. Isaiah Bond is the big one, the second leading receiver last year. And let's just talk about that tight end that is leaving as well. Amari Niblack was the 3rd leading receiver. You're going to be losing him off this team as well. So the wide receiver room looks a little diminished, but the talent is still here. Kobe Prentice and Kendrick Law will lead this wide receiver room, followed by Jalen Hale, Cole Adams, and Emmanuel Henderson Jr. A couple freshmen come in, and Caleb Odom and Ryan Williams. They could definitely make some big impacts in their first year as an Alabama Crimson Tide member. And they also do get a guy over from the portal following Kalen DeBoer from Washington, was Jeremy Bernard, a guy that is a little bit of a lost commodity behind Odunze and McMillan and Polk. He's a really talented player that's going to provide a good lift to this Alabama wide receiver room. Already talked about Niblack leaving, so let's talk about some of the guys that return in the tight end room. CJ Dupree is going to be coming back here, 11 catches for 187 yards last year. Robbie Oates is going to be back here as well. Apologies if I mispronounced that last name, but Josh Cuevas is a tight end that transfers in from Washington. It'll either be him or Dupree that ends up getting that starting nod. And with J.C. Latham off to the NFL, Seth McLaughlin and T.J. Ferguson off with the transfer portal, your offensive line is going to consist of these names. After the whole debacle with Caden Proctor, at the end of the day, he will be a member of the Alabama Crimson Tide, along with Elijah Pritchett, Tyler Booker, Jaden Roberts, and Wilkin Formby, as well as Parker Brailsford, another Washington transfer that should give a boost to this offensive line. He may even start. Again, it's going to be really interesting to watch Kalen DeBoer with a true dual-threat quarterback, but Jalen Milroe has a lot of weapons to work with. Yeah, the running back room may be a little bit inexperienced, but again, I have faith in the talent that is in this room. Kobe Prentice and Kendrick Law, along with Jeremy Bernard, are going to make for a really good 1-2-3 pairing in the or I should say a really good 1-2-3 triple in the wide receiver room for Jalen Milroe. The only question is, though, is that offensive line has got to get better. 44 sacks. That's how many times Milroe was on the ground last season. That number has got to get better. Otherwise, some of the defenses in the SEC here is going to take full advantage of the weakness that Bama has on the offensive line. Let's talk about the defense here. And look, there are a ton of NFL caliber players leaving the defensive side of the ball. It is absolutely crazy. So starting out with the defensive line, Justin Eboigbe and Chris Braswell are off to playing on Sundays. Eboigbe had 7 sacks last season, and then Braswell 8 sacks last season. Well, it doesn't stop there, because in the linebacker room, Dallas Turner 10 sacks last season, and he was a force. A great pass rusher, and Tresman Marshall are gone out of the linebacker room, as well as Kendrick Blackshire, who really didn't get a whole ton of playing time at Bama, but is a very, very good player. Well, I shouldn't really say that. He did get his playing time. 16 tackles last season. He is off, I believe, to Texas. So let's talk about the defensive line and linebacker room, that front 7, if you will, for Bama this year. Tim Keenan, Tim Smith, Jaheim Otis, Damon Payne, and Jamarian Latham are all back on the defensive line, and you get a Texas A&M transfer, my apologies, and LT Overton that I think is going to be a really good player for them as well. Linebacker room, yes, you lose a ton of exceptional talent, especially that in Dallas Turner, but Deontay Lawson, Jahad Campbell, Quindarius Robinson, and Justin Jefferson, not to be confused with the Vikings wide receiver that just signed a huge contract, will be back to this defensive front 7. So defensive line, I think, is really going to be pretty good. Yes, you lose, quick math, how many did I say? 25 sacks of production gone from last season, but you get Deontay Lawson back, you get Campbell back. Those were 2 of your top 3 tacklers from last season. I think this Alabama front 7 is going to be just fine. They were a pretty solid rush defense last year. I expect them to continue to be that way in 2024. In the defensive back room, this is where things start to get a little scary for the Alabama defense. And I don't mean scary good. I mean scary as in you're kind of holding back, biting your nails a little bit, because a ton of weapons leave this defensive back room. So let's start off with the cornerbacks that are going to be leaving the room for the NFL from the Alabama Crimson Tide. Terrion Arnold and Kool-Aid McKinstry were exceptionally good players, and Kool-Aid McKinstry, on top of having one of the coolest names in college football, was one of the best corners in college football. He is going to be gone. Both those guys had tremendous seasons here with this team last year. McKinstry, 32 tackles, 7 passes defended last season. You take a look at what Terrion Arnold did, 63 tackles, 12 passes defended, 5 interceptions last year, as well as Trey Amos and Des Ricks off to the portal. In the safety position, Jalen Key is off to go play in the NFL. I believe he was Mr. Irrelevant, if I am not mistaken. 60 tackles, 1 pass defended, 1 pick for him last season. And then this is the big one. You lose your leading tackler and a stud freshman in Caleb Downs going into his sophomore year. He is transferred to Ohio State. So a big pickup for Ryan Day, but an even bigger loss for Kalen DeBoer and company. 107 tackles, 3 pass defended, 2 interceptions as a true freshman last year. There's just no other talent like him in the country. That's a huge loss, as well as you lose guys like Jake Pope, Christian Story, and Peyton Woodyard. And don't forget, kickers are people too. You lose Will Reichard. So let's talk about this defensive back room and what Alabama has for 2024. Well, Jaleel Hurley is really the only big notable loss the only big notable get back in the cornerback room. You do get Domani Jackson, who is a transfer that is going to be coming into this room. Really anything that they can get, he comes over from USC. But the cornerback room is going to be exceptionally young. Jalen Mbakwe, Zabian Brown, and Xavier Mincy are all going to be guys that are going to have big impacts in the cornerback room as freshmen this year. In the safety position, Malachi Moore does come back, so he's going to end up leading this defensive back room, as well as Devontae Smith. And you do get a couple former Big Ten guys coming over to play safety in Keon Sabb and King Mack. And as I said a little bit ago, kickers are people too. James Burnap comes back as the punter, and to replace Will Reichard, Graham Nicholson is in. Was the Lou Groza a winner from last season? He's transferring over from Miami, Ohio, is an exceptional kicker. He'll definitely be able to fill those shoes of Will Reichard. Again, let's talk about this defense overall. Actually, let's just talk about the team overall for a second. 39 outgoing transfers because Nick Saban has retired. Now, they are bringing in some good talent, as you saw, but the defensive back room is extremely young. Albeit extremely talented, it's extremely young. This defensive front seven is going to have to carry a lot of the load, and that pass defensive number that you looking was pretty good last year definitely could take a step back in 2024. But with guys like Moore and Sabb and Mack in that safety room, you do get a transfer in Domani Jackson that I think will be pretty good. This is definitely an Alabama team that's going to have to rely on their secondary to step up and play really well this season. Let's dive on into the schedule for Alabama, and there are just a ton of tough games on the schedule. Hey, we'll talk about them as we get there. Any game that's at home will be underlined, while any road game will be in italics. That is that slanted text. Any game in green, I think, is a game that Alabama's going to win handedly. Any game that's in yellow is, that's going to be a pretty scary game there. But I think Alabama's going to be able to escape that one with a win. And, of course, red is any loss that I predict. For the Crimson Tide in 2024, they'll start out the season 2-0. They should get two pretty easy wins here against Western Kentucky and South Florida. Now, albeit South Florida is a team that is trending in the right direction. And look, they gave Alabama a scare last year. They are still nowhere near the talent level of the Crimson Tide. And Alabama had to go on the road to play that game last year. Now they get this game at home. Kalen DeBoer gets it in Bryant-Denny Stadium. So a couple really feel-out games here just to kind of, let Jalen Milroe utilize some of his weapons, create some chemistry with some of the more younger wide receivers, especially the transfer in Jeremy Bernard and Josh Cuevas that are coming over, and for the defense to really figure some things out before you have to go on the road to play in Camp Randall against Wisconsin. Watch out for this game, especially if Alabama's secondary just doesn't look great. If Jalen Milroe once again gets off to a slow start and Kalen DeBoer just isn't really finding his footing here, and some of these players really just aren't finding their place, this is going to be a very dangerous game. I still think Alabama is going to win, but Wisconsin and Luke Fickell play a tough brand of defense. Their quarterback this year is Tyler Van Dyke. They're going to have exceptional running backs. They do every single year. The wide receiver room, I think, is underrated. Watch out for the Wisconsin Badgers this year in 2024. They can be a dangerous team, not only to Alabama, but in the Big Ten. I think the Crimson Tide and Jalen Milroe are going to be able to do enough to escape with the win, but that's a huge trap game here already in week 3. They get their first bye week of the year before one of the most anticipated matchups of the season, a rematch of last year's SEC championship game in which Alabama won. I don't think it's going to go the way of Alabama this year, though. I do have Georgia winning. I just think Georgia's physicality level on the defensive side will be too much for Alabama to handle, especially with the struggles of that offensive line. And Carson Beck, a lot of people are going to be talking about him this year. I expect him to have a huge 2024. I expect him to be in the Heisman race. And Carson Beck is he's just an absolute dude, and Georgia has got a lot of weapons to work with there. I expect them to be able to take advantage of what is lacking in this Alabama secondary. Georgia will go on the road in Bryant-Denny Stadium, get a big win. Alabama starts out 3-1. Couple bounce-back performances here, though. You get to play Vanderbilt, and sorry to all my Commodore fans out there, you're not beating Bama, even though this is a home game. Bama should roll there. Bama should also roll against South Carolina there. The Gamecocks got a lot of pieces to work with, but they are losing some good talent, and they got some things to figure out there with that program. I don't see them matching up with Alabama this season. Okay, getting into the second half of the schedule here, this 3-game stretch is absolutely brutal. Thank goodness you have a bye week in some facet in these 3 weeks, because this is just an absolutely brutal stretch. You have to go on the road and play the Tennessee Volunteers, and if Nico is living up to the hype, if he is going to be as good a quarterback as everyone says he's going to be, this is a tough one for Bama, because Tennessee, I think, is going to have a pretty darn solid defense this year. I don't think it's going to be anything super spectacular, super special, but James Pierce is a guy that you need to watch out for. He's one of the best defensive players in the entire country. Sadly, I just don't think Tennessee has the defensive capabilities to match up with what Bama has offensively. After that loss to Georgia, they're going to figure some things out, and they're going to find some things in the Vanderbilt game and the South Carolina game that are going to work, and they're going to get on a roll here. Tennessee has had struggles beating Bama. The only time they did it was a couple of years ago. Actually, the last time this game was played in Neyland Stadium. It's going to be rocking. It's going to be a packed house, and I think it's going to be a very fun game. But I do think that Alabama will go on the road and win this one here. Milroe makes one too many plays. While James Pierce has a field day, it is Jalen Milroe, Kalen DeBoer, and the Crimson Tide that have the last laugh, much like the case will be in the game against Missouri. I think Alabama wins this one too. But again, another tricky game to try to predict, because as long as this Alabama secondary has their struggles and continues to look young and inexperienced and just doesn't gel, if that is the case, Brady Cook to Luther Burden is going to be connection that is going to hit all day long. And Luther Burden is going to be an exceptionally hard player for Alabama to slow down. If Caleb Downs were still here, might be a little bit of a different story. I know you still got a really talented player in Malachi Moore, but he's just an exceptionally talented weapon. I think Missouri's going to have their pretty good day on offense. But with the losing Blake Baker over to go now to LSU, I don't think that defense is where it is going to be from last season, even though they still do have some pretty darn good defensive players. They lost a lot of their top guys to the NFL, some even more pretty good depth pieces to the transfer portal. I think that Missouri defense takes a step back, and I think that's big for Bama. They will get that win against Missouri in Bryant-Denny Stadium. You get your second bye week here before the game on the road against LSU. And just a little footnote to add, I don't think the bye weeks could come at any better point for Alabama this season. I think they dropped this game to the LSU Tigers. I know the defense last year was atrocious. It is going to get better this year. As I just talked about, Blake Baker is going to come over there. You have a ton of talented guys, so maybe a little bit of lackluster stuff on the defensive line, but Harold Perkins is still there, still one of the best defensive players in the country. The secondary should be solid, and if Garrett Nussmeier is going to utilize his weapons well enough, LSU is going to walk away with the win here. I see a second loss for Bama somewhere. The most likely one the rest of the way to me is that one on the road in a rocking environment in Tiger Stadium. I think LSU picks up that win. Should be an easy win against the Mercer Bears, and I think they beat the Oklahoma Sooners here, but watch out for Boomer Sooner. Jackson Arnold, I think, is going to be a stud. He has a ton of returning weapons from last season to throw to. The defense is going to take another step in the right direction, and this is another game on the road that I feel like if, again, things are not going as well as they could be going for Alabama, that's another game they trip up. However, I think Milroe, with his experience and his playmaking ability, will outduel Jackson Arnold. They'll get that win, and then I think Bama wins the Iron Bowl as well. Hugh Freeze has got the Auburn Tigers trending in the right direction. Not enough talent to compete with Alabama on the road in Bryant-Denny, even though it'll be rocking because, hey, it's the Iron Bowl. It's a rivalry game, of course. So I got the Alabama Crimson Tide sitting here at 10-2. Definitely a pretty darn good season considering the schedule you have to play through if you are Kalen DeBoer. Should still be a team that gets a spot in the college football playoff, but again, there are a couple of these games that, look, watch out for Wisconsin, watch out for Tennessee, watch out for Oklahoma, even at home, watch out for Missouri. There's a ton of slip-up potential here for Bama, and things could go downhill for Kalen DeBoer really quickly if he doesn't get his grip right away. However, I think that Alabama is still going to be really good. You can't count out Kalen DeBoer. He's been a winner everywhere he's gone. I still think it remains that way for Bama. Maybe not up to the Bama standard quite yet, but he'll find his footing really nicely. 10-2, I think, is a good record for Bama this season. Let me know what you think about the Crimson Tide in the comment section down below. And as always, remember to play hard but tailgate harder. Hey, Notre Dame, you're on the block next. Goodbye.